All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling habits.
Ooh, habits. Love it.
We're using Atomic Habits by James Clear as our main source.
A classic.
It's all about those small changes, like 1% better each day.
Tiny tweaks, big
And
results.
Exactly. That's the power of Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
We'll unpack how those tiny changes can totally transform your life.
It's pretty amazing how much those little things add up over time. Like, it's not about some crazy overhaul.
Right.
It's those small adjustments over weeks, months, years. They snowball into something really impressive.
It's like earning 1% interest on your efforts every single day, right?
That's a great way to put it. Compounding in action.
Yeah. But here's the thing. We often get discouraged
I know what you mean.
because we don't see those huge results immediately
Totally. We're working hard, but it feels like we're stuck.
on a plateau, right?
Exactly. And Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential.
Okay, the plateau of latent potential. I like that.
So it's easy to fall into the valley of disappointment. You're putting in the work,
Yeah.
but not seeing those big, flashy results.
All right, like you're running on a treadmill but not really going anywhere.
Yes. It's like, have you ever seen that thing with the ice cube?
What do you mean?
Like when you're applying heat to an ice cube,
Yeah.
it seems like nothing's happening, but then, bam, it hits 32 degrees and starts to melt.
That's a great visual. So we're putting in the effort, the heat, but it takes time to see those changes, to hit that melting point.
Exactly. And the key is to know that we are making progress.
But how do we know that we're actually on that plateau and not just, wasting our time?
Well, one way is to look for those subtle signs. You might not see those big changes right away,
Right.
but are you making progress in other areas?
Like smaller, less obvious wins.
Yeah. Like, let's say you're hitting the gym consistently.
Oh, yeah.
The scale might not be budging much,
Been there.
but do your clothes fit better? More energy? Sleeping better? Those are signs.
So those are the plateau working its magic behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's happening, even if you don't see it in the most obvious way.
I get it. It's about recognizing those smaller victories. Like, I remember when I was learning to play guitar, I felt like I wasn't getting any better for a while.
Yeah, we all hit those walls.
But then I realized, hey, my chords are smoother. I'm transitioning between them better.
You are making progress, just not the kind you were expecting.
Right. So patience and persistence, key takeaways here.
Couldn't agree more. If you quit on the plateau, you miss the breakthrough.
It's about trusting the process. Those little gains, they're adding up, even if we don't see the fireworks right away.
Trust the process, absolutely.
Okay, so patience, persistence. But where do we actually begin? What should our focus be?
This is where Clear drops a major truth bomb.
Oh, I love truth bombs. Hit me.
Systems over goals.
Systems over goal.
Yeah. We often get caught up in the end result, the goal. But real lasting change, it happens at the systems level.
Systems level. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Okay, think about losing weight. You could go on a crazy diet.
Sure.
You might lose some weight initially. But if you don't change your overall eating habits,
It's not going to last.
right, you'll likely go back to your old ways.
So it's not just a quick fix. It's about changing the whole system, the underlying habits.
Yes. It's like, when my desk gets cluttered?
Oh, tell me about it.
I can tidy it up, but if I don't change how I'm doing things, those habits that lead to the clutter,
It's just going to get messy again.
exactly. It's about building a healthy system, one that leads to the results you want.
Systems over goals. Got it. Now, this next concept, it really made me think. Identity-based habits. It's like who you are shapes what you do, right?
It's a really powerful connection. Clear nails it. Our habits, they're a reflection of our identity.
So it's not just about doing something. It's about being the kind of person who does that thing naturally.
You got it. Think about it. Someone who sees themselves as an artist.
Okay, yeah.
They're more likely to make time for creative stuff. It's part of who they are.
So it's like, instead of saying, I want to exercise more, I say, I am an active person.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is there's this feedback loop
A feedback loop.
between habits and identity. The more we act like a certain kind of person.
The more we become that person.
Exactly. It makes it easier to keep those habits going. Like, for me, becoming a morning person.
Oh, you too. It was a struggle for me.
It took time. I started forcing myself to get up earlier.
Yeah.
But the more I did it, the more I started to actually see myself as someone who thrives in the morning.
And now you're like, hit the ground running at like 6 a.m.
Pretty much. It's just who I am now.
It's like the habit becomes part of your identity. Okay, so we've got systems, we've got identity. But how do habits actually work? Like the mechanics of it all.
Clear breaks this down brilliantly with something called the habit loop.
Okay, the habit loop. Lay it on me.
It's a 4-stage cycle: cue, craving, response, reward.
All right, walk me through it. Let's use, I don't know, checking social media as an example.
Perfect example. So say you're working on your computer. Your phone lights up with a notification.
Ugh, the dreaded notification.
That's the cue. It triggers a craving.
Like, ooh, what's happening? Gotta see.
Exactly. Then comes the response. You pick up your phone, check the notification, and finally, you get a little hit of dopamine. That feeling of, I know what's going on now.
The reward. And then the cycle repeats itself.
Over and over again. Each time, the habit gets a little stronger.
Okay, so now that we know how this loop works, how do we actually use this to change our habits?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
So we left off talking about that habit loop. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Right, right. And I'm thinking, how do we actually use this knowledge to, ditch those bad habits that are holding us back?
Well, one thing Clear suggests, and I think it's really smart, is making those bad habits inconvenient.
Inconvenient.
Yeah. Increase the friction, make them less appealing. It's not always about just, white-knuckling it with willpower.
Oh, I know that feeling.
We've got to set ourselves up for success, make those bad habits harder to do.
This makes me think about my phone. I realized that I was spending way too much time on social media. Scrolling.
Endless scroll.
So I did something really simple. Moved all the social media apps to the last page on my phone. Buried them in a folder.
Out of sight, out of mind, right?
It's amazing how just that little bit of friction, having to actually search for them, made a huge difference.
It breaks the automatic cycle.
It's like, do I really want to go through all that effort just to check Instagram?
And then the answer is usually no.
Most of the time, yeah. And speaking of making things inconvenient, Clear tells this fascinating story about the invention of the cash register.
Oh, yeah. The classic example.
It goes back to the late 1800s. There was this saloon owner, John Patterson.
Struggling with employee theft.
Classic problem, right?
Sadly, yeah. And then he stumbles across this new invention, Ritty's incorruptible cashier, the first cash register.
Sounds pretty high-tech for the 1800s.
It was revolutionary. It locked the cash and receipts inside after every transaction. Employees couldn't steal.
So by just changing the environment.
He removed the opportunity for theft. Brilliant.
Wow. So it's not always about resisting temptation. It's about, taking away the temptation altogether.
Exactly. And this applies to so many bad habits. Want to watch less TV.
Oh, that's a good one.
Unplug it after every use. Make it a little harder to just plop down and turn it on. Social media.
I hid the apps.
Perfect. Website blockers, app limits.
All those little roadblocks can really add up.
The key is to increase the friction, make those bad habits less convenient.
Make them work for it.
And we can use technology to our advantage.
That's true. We talked about making bad habits inconvenient. But what about making them less rewarding?
Ah, yes. That's where the habit contract comes in.
Okay, a habit contract. I'm listening.
Basically, you introduce some immediate pain or discomfort associated with that bad habit.
So it's like, if I do this bad thing, something I don't like will happen.
You got it. A little consequence to make you think twice.
Makes sense. Give me an example.
So let's say you want to cut back on online shopping.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Right. Every time you make an impulse purchase, you have to donate the same amount to a charity.
Ooh, a charity you don't support, maybe?
Exactly. Suddenly, that impulse buy doesn't seem so appealing.
It's like, wait, do I really want that new gadget or do I want to support that cause?
Exactly. It makes you pause and consider the consequences of your actions.
I'm starting to see a theme here. It's not just about changing what we do, but about changing who we believe we are.
It's that identity shift again. Clara really nailed it with this one. It's not, I want to lose weight. It's, I am a healthy person.
Right. And those are two very different mindsets.
Huge difference. It's about aligning our actions with the identity we want to embody.
Okay, I've definitely experienced this. When I started writing, it felt like pulling teeth.
The dreaded blank page.
But the more I wrote, the more I started to see myself as a writer.
Mm.
And that changed everything.
It became part of your identity.
Writing became less of a chore and more of an expression of who I am.
It's amazing how that works. And it leads to this idea of finding your strengths. Remember what Clear says about finding the game where the odds are in your favor?
Oh, yeah. It's about playing to our natural strengths, right?
Exactly. We used to think we had to force ourselves to be good at everything.
Yeah, like be well-rounded and all that.
But that's a recipe for burnout. It's much more effective to focus on what comes naturally and build habits around those strengths.
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So figure out what your strengths are. What are you naturally drawn to? What do you enjoy doing? Build your habits around those things.
Working with our natural wiring instead of against it.
Exactly. It makes the whole process so much smoother.
Okay, so we're playing to our strengths, making those good habits easy and rewarding. But how do we know if we're pushing ourselves enough? Without going overboard.
That's where the Goldilocks rule comes in.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot, that level of challenge that keeps us engaged but not overwhelmed.
Give me an example.
Learning a new language. If you start with something too easy, you get bored. Too difficult, frustration sets in.
Been there.
But when you find that perfect level, it's magic.
Ah, the flow state.
You get it. That feeling of being totally absorbed. Time flies by.
It's like being in the zone. But even with the right level of challenge, there are going to be times when we get bored, right? It's inevitable.
You're right. And Clear actually challenges us to embrace those moments of boredom.
Embrace boredom, really.
He even says that passion isn't always the key to success.
Wait, I thought passion was everything.
It's a common belief. But Clear argues that at a certain point, success comes down to who can handle the boredom of showing up and doing the work.
Day after day, even when it's not exciting.
Exactly. Think about professional athletes. They train no matter what, even when they're not feeling it.
Because they've built that discipline, that routine.
It's about showing up, putting in the reps, even when it's not glamorous.
This makes me think about those days when I just don't feel like writing. But I do it anyway.
Because it's a habit. You've built that system.
And you know what? Most of the time, once I start, the words come. It's like pushing through that initial resistance.
And that's what separates the amateurs from the pros. The ability to keep going, even when it's not easy or exciting.
It's those moments, those choices we make, they really shape our habits in our lives.
So true. One last key insight from Atomic Habits.
Oh, there's more. I'm all ears.
Reflection and review. Clear stresses this a lot.
Okay, so it's not like set it and forget it. We need to actually look back and see how we're doing.
Regularly. We have to evaluate our habits and make tweaks along the way. It's about treating ourselves like, scientists.
Scientists!
We're running experiments on our own behavior, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and making adjustments.
This is where habit tracking comes in handy, right? Seeing those patterns, those areas where we're crushing it and where we need to tweak things.
Exactly. And Clear suggests asking ourselves some key questions during these reflection periods.
Like what? Give me the cheat sheet.
Well, he says, what went well this week? What didn't go so well? What did I learn?
And most importantly, what changes can I make going forward?
You got it. Simple but powerful framework for analyzing our progress. It helps us make smarter decisions about our habits.
It's like zoom out, look at the big picture, then use that information to fine-tune our approach.
It's a constant process.
And it reminds us that our habits aren't set in stone. They change as we do.
That's a great point. What works for us today, it might not work for us a year from now. We have to adapt.
So it's this ongoing cycle, right? Experiment, reflect, refine.
Exactly. That's how we make sure our habits are always supporting us, pushing us toward where we want to be.
Back again for part 3. Our deep dive into atomic habits. It's been quite a journey, right?
It really has. James Clear gives us so much to think about.
So much. We've covered a lot of ground here. Tiny gains, the importance of systems, the link between habits and who we are.
And it all ties together, doesn't it? It's all connected.
It is. I think if I had to sum up the whole thing in one sentence,
Go for it.
it would be small changes done consistently, they lead to big results.
That's it. That's the essence of Atomic Habits. It's not about some massive overnight transformation.
Right.
It's those 1% improvements, like we talked about, compound interest. Those small changes accumulate over time.
And it all comes back to those 4 laws of behavior change, right?
Yeah.
Make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
They're like our cheat code for building good habits.
Totally. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, and maybe this is just where I'm at right now in life,
I'm curious.
it's the focus on systems, not just goals. We get so caught up in that end result, right?
I know. Like, I want to achieve this, I want to be that.
But clearing really drives home that real change, lasting change. It comes from building the right systems.
It's like creating a foundation for success. Instead of, I want to lose weight, it's, I'm building a system that supports healthy eating.
Right. Taking the pressure off willpower and motivation. If we have the right systems in place, those good habits, they almost become automatic.
Exactly. The good choices become the easy choices. Remember the 2-minute rule?
Oh, that was a good one. Breaking down those new habits into tiny, manageable steps.
Read before bed becomes read 1 page. Go for a run becomes just put on my running shoes.
It's genius. Because sometimes getting started is the hardest part.
Once you take that first tiny step,
You're like, well, I'm already doing it, might as well keep going.
then suddenly you've read a whole chapter. Or you've run a mile.
The snowball effect.
Yeah.
Small actions, they build on each other. And this ties into another big idea we discussed, identity-based habits.
This was a game changer for me personally. It's not just about doing the right things. It's about becoming the type of person who does those things.
So true. It's like, who do I want to be, and what habits will support that vision of myself?
It's powerful stuff. Instead of, I want to be more productive, it's, I am a productive person. And then we start acting in a way that aligns with that identity.
And the more we act in alignment with that identity.
The more it becomes ingrained in who we are.
I definitely experienced this with meditation. At first, it felt so forced, so awkward.
It takes practice.
It does. But the more I meditated, the more I started to see myself as a meditator.
Yeah.
And then it just became...
A natural part of who you are.
Exactly. But I think it's important to remember, on this habit-building journey,
What's that?
we're not going for perfection.
Yeah.
We're going to mess up.
Yeah.
We're going to slip up.
It's inevitable. We're human.
It's not about never making a mistake.
It's about getting back on track. Learning from those slip-ups.
Clearance actually says that failure is part of the process.
He really does. It's not the opposite of success. It's part of the path to success.
And that's where reflection comes in, right? That regular check-in with ourselves.
Yeah.
Seeing what's working, what's not, making those adjustments.
Continuous improvement.
We're like scientists experimenting on our own behavior. And remember the Goldilocks rule. Finding that sweet spot, that level of challenge that keeps us engaged and growing.
Not too easy, not too hard. Just right.
It's about pushing ourselves, but not overwhelming ourselves. And when we find that perfect challenge,
We get into that flow state.
where time just disappears.
But even when we find those things we love, those things that challenge us in the right way, there are still going to be moments of boredom.
That's true.
And that's okay. It's part of the journey.
It's about embracing the whole process, the good, the bad, the exciting, the boring. It's all part of growth.
I think that's a great place to wrap up.
It really is. We've covered so much today.
Tiny changes, systems, identity, the Goldilocks rule.
The power of boredom
We've got a whole new toolkit for building better habits.
and building a life we love.
Exactly. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Find what works for you, experiment, reflect, and keep refining.
You've got this.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into atomic habits.
We'll see you next time.